Now we'll be working on GCF Practice, and basically this is, you look at the terms that you have, try to find a greatest common factor, and then continue factoring if you can. So keep that in mind. It's not always you can factor after you take the GCF. So let's see what I mean. If I look at this, number 1, I can see that I have something in common between 7x to the second and negative 28x. They are both divisible by 7. So if I can factor the 7 out, and if I look at them, I can see that there is an x in each one of them. So I'm going to factor x out as well. Now if you take 7x out of 7x to the second, only x will be left. Copy the minus. And then 28 divided by 7 is a 7 or is a 3. 7 times 4, sorry about that. Now 28 divided by 7 is a 4, and since I factored the x out, so that's going to be my answer, and that's it. I just factored out the GCF and I'm done. Now let's move on to number 2. X to the fourth plus x to the third minus 56x to the second. I can see that there is an x in each one of them. You always take the one with the lowest power because that's in common between all of them. So if you take x to the second from x to the fourth, so 4 minus 2 is a 2. And then 3 minus 1. So as you can see, the power 3 is going down 2. So it's going to be just x to the first, so just x. And 2 minus 2 is a 0, so I'm taking the whole x to the second out. So I'm going to be just left with negative 56. Okay, if you want to double check, you can always distribute to see if you factor the GCF right. So x to the second times x to the second is x to the fourth. You add the powers. X to the second times x is x to the third. X to the second times negative 56 is negative 56 x to the second. So I did factor the GCF right. Now your next step is to look inside the parentheses and see if you can factor it further. Now as you can see, this is a trinomial. You have x to the second, you have x, and you have negative 56. So let's try to factor it. As you can see, a is 1. A is the number in front of x squared, so it's 1. Now b is also the number in front of x, so that's 1 as well. And c is negative 56. So the c is the constant by itself. And in order to factor it, you have to think of two numbers that would multiply to give you negative 56, which is the a times c. So you have to find two numbers that would multiply to give you whatever a times c is. So that's a negative 56. And then add to give you b. And in this case, b is 1. So keep that in mind. This is b. Okay, now, two numbers that would multiply to give me negative 56 and add to give me 1. I'm thinking 8 and 7. So one of them has to be negative because 8 times 7 would give you 56, not negative 56. So let's decide which one's going to be the negative. Since they're going to be added to give you 1, so then the 7 has to be the negative 1. So 8 times negative 7 is negative 56. 8 plus negative 7 is 1. Now, once you do that, then you're done because a is 1. So you don't need to do anything further. So then don't forget to copy x to the second down. And then this thing is going to factor to give you x plus 8, which is the number that you just found over here. And the other factor is going to be x minus 7. And that's it. This is how you factor by GCF, and then if you need to factor further. So if you have a trinomial, remember always you have to find what multiplies to give you what AC is, and add to give you B. Once you find the two numbers, if A is 1, you're done. So x plus 8, x minus 7, these are the two factors, and that's your final answer. So let's move on to number 3. Now, as you can see here, also I have 3 different terms. So let's go ahead and check what's in common between each one of them. Let's start with the numbers. 24, 18, and negative 30. What's common between 24, 18, and negative 30? I can see a 6 over here, because 6 times what would give me 24? 4. Then 6 times what would give me 18? 3. And then 6 times what would give me negative 30? Negative 5. So I'm done with the numbers. Now let's go ahead and look at the a's. This is a to the third, a to the third, a to the second. Always take the one with the least power. So 3 minus 2 is a 1, so it's going to be a to the 1. 3 minus 2 is a 1, so it's going to be a to the 1. Or you can think about it, if I factor a to the second from a to the third, only one a is going to be left. Now if you factor a to the second out, so no a will be left for -5, so it's all gone. Now let's move on to y. So I have a y squared, so I'm done with the a. Let me scratch it out. Now let's look at the y's. You always take the one with the least power, so I'm going to take the y out. So if you factor y out, nothing's going to be done. Nothing is going to be left to be written over here. Y to the second, if you have to factor y out, so there's going to be only y left. Again, y to the second, factor y out, only it's going to be y left. So that's going to be my final answer. Now let's move on to the last problem. 16x to the third y minus 24x to the second y plus 32xy. Now let's try to factor out. Let's start with the numbers. What's common between 16, -24, and 32? They're all divisible by 8. 8 times what would give me 16? 2. 8 times what would give me -24? -3. 8 times what would give me 32? That's a 4. Another way to think about it is that you can divide the number. 16 divided by 8 is 2, and so on. Okay? Now let's start with the x's. X to the third, x to the second, and x. I'm going to factor the one with the least power. So if you factor x from x to the third, you're only left with x to the second. If you factor x out of this, only x will be left. And you factor x out, nothing will be left to be with the 4. Now let's look at the y's. There's a y in each one of them. So I'm going to factor a y out. So then no y's will be left to be with the numbers. So that's going to be your final answer. Now you might look at the inside and ask yourself, can I factor this more? So let's double check, because it's a trinomial, so you need to go through this step. If a is 2, b is -3, and c is 4. So I need two numbers that would multiply to give me a c, which is 8, and that would add to give me -3. Now 4 times 2 is 8, but they will not add up to give me -3. There's 8 and 1, so I cannot think of a number. So then that would be my final answer, and you stop there. Now that's everything for GCF practice.